Jeff Menges is not just one of the original 25 artists of Magic the Gathering, but he is also a historian for the early artwork for the game itself. A good example would be his book, The Gathering, Reuniting the Pioneering Artists of Magic. It features each artist's version of the paintings they did then versus how they do them now, and let me tell you, it's a testament to artistic growth if there ever was one. More importantly though, it shows that Jeff is an artist, and with that being said, let's see what this artist has to say.
So thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
So my first question is, the place that you live, I was looking at the places that you live, how lucky do you feel to live in a place like that, being a landscape painter yourself?
Well, it's fortunate, but it's not an accident by any means. It was a pretty recent move that we made to be here. I live in southern Vermont, and being in a place that had an environment closer to what I want to paint was a big part of what we were looking for in a new location.
And one of the interesting things that I kind of wanted to play devil's advocate a little bit with you, but you said in an interview, you were talking about digital versus traditional art, and you said that, excuse the motorcycle, that's always wonderful. Wow. So you said that you believe that the internet has killed a lot of artists' imaginations because of the ease that they can get images to base their paintings off of. But at the same time, is that not what you do when you look at a landscape and incorporate it into what you paint?
It is to an extent, but what I was driving at when I made that statement is that if I don't see the landscape I want online, I can look through 1,000 others in an instant. If I'm seeking an environment outside to paint, it's a matter of moving physically to change my point of view or my vantage, and or the lighting, waiting for the right time of day. It's a much more or organic means of working. But if I want a different seascape, or if I want a sunset as opposed to a bright daytime, I can just type in sunset beach scene and I'll get those. And if I know I don't want one with sand, if I want one with rocks, I can just type in sunset beach scene with rocks, and boom, I'll have 100 to choose from. So to stretch your imagination to come up with something, or to make those changes from within instead of from what you're consuming, is much less likely now, because you've got the most amazing reference library at your fingertips all the time.
I see. So what would you say is the most difficult type of landscape or difficult time of day for a landscape to be set at? What are the most challenging ones you can think of?
Well, seascape is tough because it involves a moving tide and water that comes in and out and changes all the time. So unless you're leaning very heavily on photographic reference and a frozen moment in time, interpreting that movement of the waves, or a very windy scene.
I apologize. My dog's just. I'm so sorry. Can you restart that? I apologize. Go on. I apologize for that.
The difficulty in doing a landscape piece from life, or the most difficult part of that, would be trying to capture the parts that are going to go through motion. And what that means mostly is interpreting the way that water falls, the way that waves move, and occasionally the way that if you're trying to capture the wind in a picture, that can be extremely challenging.
Yeah.
And there's usually a lot more involved in it than you might grasp at a glance, because some very subtle things can be done to indicate wind.
Yeah, like what can you do to
Just sort of
indicate
like the
wind?
way that you push the trees. Sorry,
What are the ways? I mean, other than
what
like
would you
you said,
do?
pushing the trees. What are some? Because that's a pretty obtuse way of thinking, right? You have to make something visible that's invisible.
Right. Yeah. Well, there's the way you move the trees. There's hair and clothing. There's just the grass itself. If you put in long blades of grass and they're all like this, or if they're all like this, you'll immediately get a sense of the way the wind is going. And you can add just a couple of leaves to something to kind of like float through an atmosphere, and you'll see the way that wind could be carrying them could definitely help that message get across.
I see. Okay. So with you do a lot of private commissions, correct? You're that primarily that's what you're doing as far as your artwork currently?
It, it's a big part of my revenue right now. Yeah.
What would be the most like say if you could say like what was the more typical private commission that assignment that you get? What do people love to see Jeff do?
Well, there's a couple of different avenues that commissions take for me, and um, I do a lot of work on the backs of artist proof cards. Magic the Gathering produced all the cards that they produced, or almost all of them, came with clean back cards.
Oh
Let's see
yes.
if I got one.
Oh yes.
And those, yeah, you know what they are, but just for people that might not,
Please, yes, absolutely
here's one.
share it.
Okay, so this is a Monza's Goblin Raiders. It was it came originally, this image came out of the alpha deck, and this is a proof card. It has nothing on the back. So these proof cards were given to the artists as so that you could distribute them as you saw fit. People used them as business cards. Some people didn't hold on to a lot of them. Some people sold them right away. But it's become a very popular collectible to do art on the backs of proof cards.
Is that one actually from Alpha itself? Is that an Alpha I'm sorry, excuse me, an Alpha artist proof?
This is a fourth edition. It's a foreign proof. It's either might be Portuguese, might be Spanish. I'm not sure. I got a couple there, but like, let me see if I can find one here that I've got some art on the back of started.
They've
Yeah,
turned into a completely like it's turned into a sub-market of the art market.
oh, very much so. This is a Firestorm Phoenix from Legends. And here's like a little ink sketch that I've started on the back of it. Let's see, I don't know if I can get that to where you can see it, where it's
Well,
readable.
you know, you could do also if you want to afterwards, if you want to just send me a photo of the actual proof, I can push that in, put it in
Sure.
the thing. So, how many artist proofs are you do you work on typically now? I mean, like, how many are in the cooker?
um, well, I take about 25 or 30 commissions at a time.
Damn.
Usually it's working well, it's working out to about twice a year I'll do that. And what I do is I fill this big accordion folder full of all the different jobs. And sometimes they involve people sending me cards to work on because they're not always artist proof cards. Sometimes people want me to alter cards that they've already got. So, and that can be anything from full art extensions, which would mean taking that small rectangular art box and bleeding the art out full to the edges. Or sometimes it might mean changing the character or changing the time of day in the painting. Uh, it can be all all kinds of different things. I have here a Bazaar of Baghdad. which I was working on this morning.
Really?
There's that was changed into a winter scene. So I changed the sky in it. I changed the color of the shadows on the buildings to make it a cooler scene and added a lot of snow and a scarf on the guy pushing the cart and a couple of different things like that.
That must be very stressful to do because it's almost like I mean, when you have a blank canvas, I mean, there's at least a way for you to sort of backtrack, right? If you make an error, but with the cards, it's almost like that just seems like it would be a much more stressful thing to work on.
Well, considering the price that a Bazaar of Baghdad is worth, yeah, that's a little nerve wracking to be painting on top of those. But the people that, I mean, I have a set of 4 here to work on.
Really? Oh, wow.
That's a big chunk of change.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And what is that one from? Is that that's from Arabian Nights, correct? Jeez, crow.
That is from Arabian Nights, yeah.
It's going for it looks like around a mere just a paltry 4,300 something, you know. What's that really, is it?
A piece.
A piece.
Yeah.
Yes, no. Yes. That's madness.
I was just going to say, so there's 4 of them, and I'll be working on those tonight and tomorrow mostly.
Wow, yeah, wow. I would
So-
need liquid Xanax to do that. I tell you that much. That would be some high stress stuff. Speaking of Bazaar of Baghdad, you made a really interesting statement about it, and I felt like that a lot of artists don't say this, and it made me think. You talked about how you'd never heard anybody say anything complimentary about the artwork for that until Dredge became a thing, and you talked about sort of the popularity of the cards influencing the desire of, you know, of how much people like it. Is that something that's difficult to deal with? I mean, or are you able to just make peace with it and say, you know what, they like it, and that's all I need to know?
Well, making peace with it is a good way to phrase it. I mean, there's art that I've done that I really like for Magic. That piece that you've got behind you is definitely one that I hold in high regard, but
It's
I'm
beautiful.
not going to hear about that frequently from collectors. That's Thalicos Lowlands from Tempest, which was actually the last new piece that I did for Magic. But yeah, the number of times that I get asked to work on that card because people like the art on it is 1 out of 100, where I'll be asked to do work on Bazaar and Swords. Maybe those 2 cards might be 65 out of the 100 will be those 2 cards. And that's because those 2 cards are relevant to people who play the game. So it's a rare circumstance that somebody will come up to me and say, Ghost Towns is my favorite card, you know, because not because of the way it works, but because they love the art.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something you have to find a little peace with. But
Yeah.
there's some
Because-
there's very good things about it too.
Right.
You know,
I mean,
the fact that I have cards that are really welcome in play is a very good thing. It means that I'm always welcome to be at an event because I'm the guy who did Swords to Plowshares and Bazaar of Baghdad.
I think you'll always be welcome. I mean, regardless of that fact. But to actually bring that point up, lately there's been, I don't know how much you keep up with the current releases that Magic's doing, but they are doing a lot of things called secret layers, where they're one-offs that are based around an artistic theme, or they're based around artists. And there have been a lot of people who were absent from the scene, coming back and doing that. Is that something that you could see yourself doing? Because I feel like, for me, I am a completist. I love the idea of people coming back, especially the original 25 coming back and doing another, doing another contribution to the game. Is that something you could see yourself doing?
Well, Magic's been a huge part of my illustration career, and it is certainly the one that resonates the most, both in what it's done for me financially and the way people appreciate my work. I still work in a fantasy motif most of the time, and there's absolutely no reason why I wouldn't be interested in doing that if I were approached and asked about it. Um, but it's not a case of me wanting to do it. It's a case of somebody at Wizards thinking that I'm a good fit for an idea that that they want to portray.
Is that bad
So
manners to like sort of
I,
call and say, "Hey, I'm available," or is that something you can't do? Or, I mean, is that gauche? I wouldn't
um,
know. I mean,
it's, it's not a bad thing to do on occasion.
I
You know,
see.
like, I mean, I can throw them a notice once a year with some new pieces and say like, hey, this is what I'm doing nowadays. If this is close to what you're looking for, I'd be happy to do it. Um, but somebody there's got to pick that up and say, oh, this would be cool if we had him come back in.
Well, I
And
will
so far that
definitely
hasn't happened, but we'll
Well, I will
see.
definitely put in a word for you because I mean, there's quite a few of you that I would love to see it, and because and this ties into
Sure.
the book that you did a few years ago, The Gathering, where you did a book about the original I think it was 40 of the original artists from Magic.
There's 41 in that book. It's artists who worked on the first 2 years of the game, and there were 49 that qualified to be in the book, and we got 41 represented in some way in the book.
What was the qualifications that were needed?
Just that you worked in the first 2 years of the game.
Okay.
Everybody that did that was invited to participate. There were a few people that were not interested in being involved. There were a
Hmm.
few people that couldn't couldn't pull together what we needed in that time, and there were some difficulties with some people.
I see. Now,
So,
the book came out gorgeous. I
but
have
we
I
did
actually
41 was pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I have a copy of it right here, and it's well, it's not being seen because of my
Mhm.
backdrop, but I it's amazing, and what's really wonderful about it is that you gave so many artists the ability to show how much they had grown over those years, and
That
was
was the whole point of the book.
mhm,
That
is
was the whole reason we did it.
and there has been so much growth. How much, I mean, and how would you say, if you were to characterize the growth that you've made, what have you gotten better at, in your opinion, that you were not as good at back when you started Magic in the 90s?
That's a pretty tricky question. Um, because it's not easy for you to judge that about your own work. It's easy to see how other people have grown. It's difficult to see how you've changed. Um, I
I
think
mean,
that my work's more consistent now,
mhm.
and I think that I've learned a lot more about managing the time it takes to produce art. But I'm at a very different point in my life right now, and that's changed a lot of that for me. When I did Magic in the beginning, I was still holding a full-time job. I had to in the beginning, and I had to look at the assignments within the reasonable amount of time I was getting paid to do them. Like you can't do $100 job and take a week to do it. It's not feasible. And I had family to provide for, and I had to put rent money together. So it's not always about doing the absolute best you can for the amount of money that they're going to pay you. But so there's a kind of a compromise that a commercial artist has to make.
And I think that a lot of people are not aware of the constraints that you original artists were put under with the production of the game. I mean, it was very quickly done, very low budget, and sort of like you guys were kind of like what's like the it's almost like a meat grinder kind of had to put it through because a lot of times artists didn't come through last minute, and then people had to do replacements. So
Mhm.
there was a great amount of stress that I
Yep.
think is overlooked.
Um, well, I think that a lot of people who appreciate the history of the game have looked into that kind of thing, and the understanding is a little better now than it used to be. But yes, you're absolutely correct. an artist who does an assignment for Magic now um, can can reasonably give it a lot more time and put a lot more into that piece because of what is being paid back to them, both uh, in a commission for the piece and then in the sale of the piece.
Hmm.
So it would not be beyond the realm of reason to think you could spend 3 weeks on a single card
Well, yes.
because of what's going to come back to you later.
Well, I believe they get 6 weeks,
Um,
from what I understand.
well, they might get 6 weeks, but is it worth 6 weeks of pay? Is what I'm saying.
Oh, I gotcha. Well,
And I think today it generally is because of the various avenues of income that come from the doing a magic card now. But when we were doing them in the very beginning, it was a tiny amount of money, like you said, and I couldn't justify spending a week doing a card that was only going to pay me $50.
yeah,
So
yeah. I mean, yeah. When
uh,
you got family to support, that's sort of it's a
right.
no-brainer.
So it got a couple of hours at my kitchen table. There are a couple of alpha cards that were literally done in a few hours. Um, and they wanted more of them from me than I could give them. I turned down the opportunity to do more because, as you say, we were just grinding them out, and I didn't really want to do that. I was interested in producing better work, and so I waited until later sets where more opportunity came in to spend that time.
And it's clear that you had put that more that you had the chance to put more effort into your later works, and I think that that goes for a lot of the artists as well. When like do you remember where you were when it became clear to you that all of a sudden you were part of this cultural phenomenon that had just blown up in ways that nobody was going to predict?
Well, I don't know if there was ever a time when nobody predicted how big it was going to be. Wizards of the Coast was super excited about this from the get go. They knew from their play testing that it had something that other games before it didn't have, and I really think that that's the the collectability factor that Magic had made it something completely different from other games. Um, but it probably wasn't until around Legends, so maybe three expansion sets in, that I began to observe the value of the cards going through a tremendous growth. And I realized I have an opportunity um, to be part of this at the beginning. And I was a comic collector before that, so I could see that I could relate to the way that early comic books grow in value, and the fact that you were in the beginning of it. If you have, the artist that creates a new character, or the artist who is the first one to draw a certain line of comics, when you get into those creative moments, they're special, and they're, no matter how much the thing changes, those early pieces of production are always going to hold value because they were developmental in the product.
Hmm.
And knowing I was a part of that meant that I needed to save and hang on to a lot of different things. So my proof cards, I've always distributed kind of with some restraint. So
Smart.
I still have good ones left. And I held on to all my sketches
Wow.
and sold them. I sold them recently to help me buy this house that we were talking about before.
Okay.
So there's a lot of understanding that I had of what the worth of what I was working on could be, and I was able to capitalize on some of that. So
Well, that makes you unique amongst the many of the originals, because I don't think that a lot of people had that foresight. How old were you when you were
yeah.
first working on the game?
Well, the first pieces I did were in '92, and that would have made me uh 27.
Wow, I mean, you were like a
So
little bit older than everybody else, but not that much. I mean, that's good.
right.
business sense for 27. I mean, you don't even want to know how wackadoodle I was at 27. I mean, I could barely sit up. But
Well, there were a couple of us, and I would name Mark Poole and Doug Schuler and myself, uh, that were going to Gen Con in Milwaukee, which is the biggest gaming con really still that there is.
mhm.
And we were already finding ground. We were all moving forward in the professional aspects, um, by doing work and role playing games at that time. Um, like you said, I was a little bit older than a lot of the Washington based magic artists because a lot of them had just come out of art school. But I had probably about 5 years under my belt by the time that I started working with Wizards. And I was doing magazine covers and role playing products and a bunch of stuff like that. So I did have a little bit of business sense and just understanding of the way that the market functioned a little bit because I had been doing it for a couple of years. And Mark and Doug were the same. Doug actually held on to his originals for a long, long time. Um, he definitely was one of the last to part with a lot of his paintings.
Do you have any of your originals still in your possession?
Oh yeah, yeah. Of I think the gatherer lists that I did 55 cards, and I still have the original paintings of 8 of them in the house.
Which one would
So,
you
and there's a
say
couple
is?
distributed among.
I'm sorry, go on.
I was just going to say that my family's got a couple more as well, but I've got 8 here, which is the one I would do what?
Which would you say would be the one you could not part with? You maybe you have an emotional connection with it, or what if for whatever reason?
Well, there's probably two. Um, the sea serpent is one that that I have now. It's not, I won't say it's one that I still had because I didn't have it for 25 years.
What?
Um, it was the one that I wanted to keep from Alpha was the sea serpent.
Right.
And shortly after the set was released and the game was doing well, I got word that Richard Garfield wanted to buy it to present it to a friend of his.
Oh,
So I wasn't going to say no to Richard Garfield wanting to do that.
right.
So I let the painting go and kept a different one. I kept Zombie Master. So for 25 years after the game came out, that piece belonged with a friend of Richard's, and I had Zombie Master, which would occasionally go on the walls in my house. But a few years back, the gentleman who owned Sea Serpent that for that time decided he needed to part ways with it, and I had let it be known that if he was ever going to do that, to please give me the opportunity to at least make him an offer for it before he started trying to sell it in other ways. And we'd been in some small amount of communication. I helped repair the frame for the piece once, and he let me borrow it back so I could scan it because prints and playmats are highly sought after by for a lot of these early images.
Mm-hmm.
So I've tried to track down a few of them. And so when he was ready to sell it, I made him a reasonable market offer at the time, which was, like I said, it was about 4 or 5 years ago now. And he really wanted me to have it back. So it worked out fine, but I had to let the Zombie Master go so that I could afford to buy
Mm-hmm.
back one of my own paintings.
That's weird, isn't it? That's gotta be
But
weird.
it's fine because it was definitely weird. Yeah, I can't afford to be in this hobby of collecting my own art.
That's surreal. Not being able, I can't afford to buy my own art. You can actually say that out loud and that be a logical sentence. That's interesting.
It's weird. Um, I mean, there's plenty of art that I do generate that is much more reasonable, but the work that has early magic attached to it is has a whole different value that's outside of my artistic value. So
So the
that's the
two,
part I can't afford.
so the two of them that you'd say that are your emotionally, well, was the Serpent and Zombie Master were the two?
No, the second one is the Sentinel Druid from Antiquities.
Okay, yeah.
Uh, it's always been a favorite of mine. I'm actually staring at it right over the screen that I'm talking to you on.
Oh, you got to send me a
Um,
picture of that.
but I've said to a number of people who asked me about it, like, okay, so why is that a favorite of yours? And I think it's because whenever I create a new piece of art, I'm trying to get an image that's in my head down onto a board or a piece of paper. And the Sentinel Druid is a piece that I really feel like I did that 100% successfully.
Hmm.
It's just, it's so close to the mark of what I was trying to say. And I captured a time of day, which is not an easy thing to do in a painting, but it has a lot of really warm gold tones and long shadows. It really feels like the end of a day in that piece. Um, I just feel like it was a very successful piece. So those two are the last ones I would be likely to get rid of.
What piece would you say was the most difficult to get through?
Hmm, that's tough. Uh, let me grab my book and take a flip through real
Yeah,
quick.
yeah.
I keep a binder. It says my book on this.
Oh, wow.
This has got one of every card I've done in it,
Oh, cool.
at least for most of the games anyway. Um, Most difficult to get through.
Or yeah, or like one that just, maybe just you maybe you don't necessarily have to be unhappy with it, but it just gave you, it was a challenge. But you could be unhappy with it if you wanted to. I mean, it's up, you can answer it any way you wish.
Yeah, there's a couple that fit those descriptions. Bazaar was really difficult because being the only card I had in the set of Arabians, I wanted to spend more time on it.
Hmm.
So it became really intricate in comparison to other magic images I'd done, especially early on. But the fact that the card became really popular and I'm asked to recreate that image frequently is difficult because of that complication, because it's so involved and there's so many characters in it.
Right.
Um, the other one that jumps out at me just flipping through these is the rock hydra, because doing something with all those different heads becomes compositionally a bit challenging to figure out how to make all those necks work together to make it look like they all belong to one beast and they're not tying themselves up in knots, but working in the space that you have pictorially at the same time.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's kind of a bizarre thing. It's sort of thinking
Scratch was
like,
tough.
yeah, because you think about that, if something like has like a Hydra eats something, like which is the final tube that it goes down into the stomach, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
It's like,
sure.
and like, do the heads fight
That's
with
rough.
each other over food? Which one has the better taste buds? These are things that keep me up at night.
Right, right. Is there a boss there? Is
Right.
there one that's in charge and the rest are followers?
There's
Yeah.
got to be a dominant like Ted that sort of like tells the other ones what to do, or maybe he got more brains than the others. I mean, you can never tell. But what's
Yeah,
what I
well, you'd have to think if each head had its own mind, then it'd be like seven different people
right.
or however many heads. So yeah, it'd be a weird thing for sure.
It'd be trying to walk in different directions. It'd be bashing into each other. I mean, it would be. I mean, I guess nature figured out. Yeah, one head is really good for most purposes. I think.
Yeah.
So, So, what would, I do love this question because with you guys, with the artist proofs and with the altars, what is like maybe some of the weirdest requests you've gotten? Because I've talked to quite a few of you, and you guys have gotten some interesting requests to do for subject matter. What were yours?
Well, you occasionally get some really distasteful requests, and I tend to just flat out refuse to do those.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um, you
That's
tend to get ones that what?
Oh, that's just to me that blows me out that people would even like have the gumption to like request something, say like X-rated or I don't know, racist or something foul that like to think that somebody's gonna be like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people who pursue that think it's amusing. They
Right.
think the shock value of those images are is amusing to them, and they love to be able to throw cards down that will get that same shock value result.
Hmm. Yeah.
But that's not what I'm in it for. So,
Well, that's well,
so that's one thing I've had to turn down from time to time. Um,
I guess maybe what was a
you get
weird one that
requests to
I'm sorry, go on.
what that I did.
Well, yeah, ones that maybe not
Weird
ones that
one
were
that I
so
did.
offensive they didn't even make the cut, but like the weirder ones that made the cut.
Um, man, that's tough. Um, I've changed the plowman on Swords to Plowshares into everything under the sun.
Oh yeah. What's some
Um,
examples?
absolutely. Uh, well, I don't do a lot. I also, one of the other things I don't like to do is do things that belong to other people as far as intellectual property is concerned.
Right.
So I I really don't want to turn them into anything like that's a Marvel comic character. I don't want to do anything that's Disney oriented. I don't want to do it, those art creations belong to other people. I wouldn't want anybody treading my stuff out all over the place. So I like to respect that those characters are theirs, and I don't like to create them myself for my own financial gain.
Okay.
Um, there's tons of people out there that could change them into Mickey Mouse if that's what you want. You don't have to get me to do that. That's not what I do. um, so generally speaking, if I'm changing the characterizations in my cards, like I'll take the plowman and I'll put him in a full suit of armor. Like
Okay.
that is something that I don't mind doing. Or I've done things where I change him into a full reaper where he's still got the scythe and that'll come down over the text box, but I'll change his robe into a black one and change his face into a skull and put a few crows in the background. That becomes a kind of an interesting take on that.
I
Or I do
wonder
things with my own characters.
which
Where
what
I'll
is some
take like to take the plowman and put him on Aiden Oakenshield's horse, or do that kind of thing.
I would love to see the plowman in the dress that Betty Davis wore in Jezebel. That would be my pick.
That
The big one,
would require a bit of research on my part,
that would be it's very big and it's wonderful and just Betty Davis deserves the honor. She's a great actress
Yep.
and no, but I mean honestly,
Big
actually
hoop skirt.
thinking, huh?
Big hoop skirt,
Yeah, it's a big hoop
wide bell
skirt.
shaped skirt.
Yep, with the ringlets. I mean, if you can, I don't know,
Yeah.
but that's good stuff. Speaking of, what is that painting that's behind you that I've been looking at? It's fascinating. I'm not quite sure what I'm looking at though.
Well, it's not a painting.
Or a drawing.
It's an ink piece. Yeah, yeah. It's by a favorite illustrator of mine named Noelle Nisbet. She was British and worked from about from about 1900 to into the 1950s. And that's an original of hers from a book of Russian fairy tales.
Oh,
It's a drawing from a Russian fairy tale book.
do you know what fairy tale it is specifically?
And I can find out in a second.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I have a couple of copies of this book. I collect her work. This is one that I've got, and
Beautiful.
it's the book that piece is from.
It always fascinates me to know what artists love.
Yeah, I like a lot of people who worked in that period. This piece is from about 1913, the one behind me. I think that maybe with the exception of Bernie Wrightson, if you know his work,
Mhm.
that her ink work might be some of the best ink work of the 20th century. I would, it'd be an argument that would be worth having with anybody who wanted to talk about it.
Interesting.
But these pieces reproduce very small, sort of like the way that magic cards are done. You know, I mean, she used these in this book. Like, here's another one. You know, and this is how big the pieces were produced, but she drew them that big.
Right. It's amazing
Trying
to
to
think
find
that
the
like
tail with that one.
it's 1913. That's amazing. I mean, what is that's almost over what? I'm bad at math, but like over 100 years ago. Like
Over 100 years ago.
it'll be 110 in a couple of years,
Okay,
right?
here's yeah. The tail is called Thomas Berenikov.
Hmm.
Haven't I collect the books for the art and haven't dived into these tales, but it's just a collection of Russian fairy tales that they were printing in England, and like I said, this one's from 1913.
That's cool stuff. And speaking of anniversaries, so it's almost coming up now. In a couple of years, it'll be 30 years since be the 30th sort of anniversary. Well, at least in accordance to your book.
Yeah, it's coming up. Is right.
Now, my question to you is, and I know that you had said in interviews that the book, even though I mean, it turned out beautiful, but it was a lot of work, right? It was very much a workload for you to handle, correct?
Well, it pretty much took a year out of my freelance career.
Is there any chance that there is a follow-up that could be to this book, in a sense that I'm thinking maybe, I don't know, having 25 of modern artists do their versions of the pieces that were done in this book, something along those lines? Is that something you have given any thought to?
Not really. It's not. I maybe 10 years ago when I did that, or close to 10 years ago, I thought that a publishing direction in my career path might be something that I wanted to pursue more of. But in truth, I want my time to be dedicated to painting. So there's just not enough time in the day to be both well.
Right.
If I really wanted to pursue publishing opportunities and produce books that and make money at it,
Right.
produce books that I wanted to make, I really wouldn't have time in my career path to be artistically successful as well. And I think there's still a lot more of that left in me, and I don't want to look away from that. So
That's fair.
I'd rather spend my time painting.
Well, that's fair. I mean, and you are correct. It's you will have to sacrifice the quality of something if you're having to give your full devotion to a creative endeavor, especially ones that are as involved as either painting or publishing.
Right.
But
Agreed. Um, it's not to say that there isn't a possibility of a book like that existing. I mean, but, and I wouldn't mind being part of a project like that.
like maybe
But
creative
for me
overly
to
like
shoulder it
overseeing
and
it,
take it
or
on myself, yeah,
like a creative what do they call
I don't
consultant?
think that I would like, sure, sure. I mean, if those opportunities opened up at some point, if somebody wanted me to be a part of something like that, I'd certainly listen to the pitch. But it's not something I'm chasing.
Is there anything, and I won't keep you for much longer, I've tortured you long enough, but is uh is there anything that you're working on
No
right now
problem.
that you are allowed to talk about or that you would like to talk about as far as, projects that are coming up?
Um, well, there's a couple things. The one that's been most interesting that I'm really looking forward to seeing how it unfolds is a project that I've worked on for almost 3 years
Okay, yeah.
that's coming out of New Zealand. Uh, and all these cards have been previewed already, so like none of these images are under
NDA.
NDA restriction anymore. They've all been seen online. Um, so the game is called Sorcery Contested Realm. It's being produced by Grinding Gear, and a lot of the people involved in it in New Zealand have some really deep gaming roots, and they've really spent the necessary time to see this development work kinks out of the project. They're really, by the time that it gets produced as a finished project, it should be a well-oiled machine. Um, and they really liked the old school Magic appearance. So some of the first people that they went after were Drew Tucker and myself. Both got involved really early on, and the creative director is a gent named Eric Olofsson. He must have really liked the looseness that's in both my work and Drew's, and he wanted to capture that and bring a big chunk of it into his game. So we did a lot of art for it early on, and uh, just we both wound up doing over 15 pieces a piece, I think, for this new game. But the art on it looks incredible, and it's you can go to the Facebook site for it, and you can see previews of almost everything. So, and that I'm really excited to see when that's going to come out on Kickstarter. I think I've lost
Sorry.
I think
When
I've
does
lost
your
your volume.
Sorry about that. A plane came by and I put myself on mute. When does the Kickstarter begin? Do you know?
Yeah, yeah. Real soon. I think it's going to begin right at the beginning of the new year.
Okay, so I'll be on the
So it
lookout
could
for
be
that.
2 months.
And I'll definitely post some pictures of your work on here and some of Drew's, well, as we're doing the conversation. And so that's coming out. Is there anything else that you have that you want to promote?
There's a game I'm just beginning to get involved with. Um, that was a role playing project that I found on Facebook, and it was about playing Dungeons and Dragons in the time of the Irish gods and Irish mythology.
Hmm.
And I'm really passionate about Irish mythology stories. I read a ton of Irish mythology. And so I'm very deeply versed in the characters and in the heroes and in the gods of all of that period. And if I was playing D&D today, it was an environment I'd love to put characters through. But when I looked into this project, I realized it was in its infancy. So I was like beside myself that I wasn't working on it. So I reached out to them and said, like, hey, I've been doing this for 35 years. I would love to be a part of this project because the subject matter just speaks to me. So I sent them a couple of examples of Celtic mythology that I'd worked on, and they openly accepted me into the fold, and now I'm on the list of illustrators that's working on it. And the initial Kickstarter project went well, and we're working on that, doing both small spot paintings for the inside and black and white line art, which is something I haven't done in forever, but doing some of that for this project. And I'm just really excited about having all these Celtic mythology images to work on.
What's your favorite Celtic
It's
myth, do you
called
think?
Heroes of Tara.
Heroes of Tara?
Yeah, that's the name of the project. There's a 3-story cycle called the Sorrows of Irish Storytelling that involve the Sons of Usnak and the Children of Lear, and what's the third one? Darmot and Grania is another tale that I really like.
Are they
The Sons of Turin.
the Sons of I feel like I've heard of that one before.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, did they make a horror movie? There was recently, I can't tell if it was Ireland or Scotland, but it was a movie about like fairies in the woods that stole a baby, and it was a really good, I think it was from Ireland. It was an Ireland horror movie, but maybe I'm not thinking of it. Does that ring a bell?
It doesn't, but it very easily could be, because even up into the last century, there were people in the back rural lands in the UK that believed that changelings were still a real thing. So
yeah, I think that's what
I
it
could
is.
definitely see.
It's
Yeah,
I wish I could
definitely see that being a good horror tale.
Oh, I wish I could figure it out, because it's a great movie. I will have to send it to you, but it's got a couple of the actors from Game of Thrones in it, so it's a real I think it's called The Hallow. Yeah, no, maybe that's not it, but I will get it to you because it's really good. And if you like the Irish stories, it's right up your alley. Well, that's all I have. Is there anything else that I'm sorry?
No, I said that'd be fine. I'd love to hear about it.
Okay, but I apologize for the lag. By the way, it comes off as me constantly interrupting you, and I'm appalled that it feels that way. But I promise everybody, it's the lag. There's a lag happening. It's not that I'm a total dipshit.
It's fine.
Oh my goodness! What's terrible too is when I try to say something funny and I wait for 3 seconds of silence, and then you laugh, and I'm like, oh, thank goodness. It has, I mean,
part of living out in the woods.
It is, but I mean, like, at least I've gotten used to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But thank you so much again for doing this, Jeff. I really appreciate it, and thank you for your flexibility with my dogs and the vets. I thank you for that.
My pleasure. If you have any follow-up questions that you need second comments on, I'd be happy to add that later.
Oh, absolutely.
And if there's any art that you need that you first, I can help you with that too.
That'd be great. I'll send you.
You said you wanted to.
Go on.
Yeah, if you can come up with a list, that'd be great.
That would be amazing.
If you have a list of the kind of things you need.
Absolutely. I will be happy to, and thank you for that.
Yeah, sure.
All right, sir. Well, you have a good evening, and thank you again. See ya.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for being here.
What a knowledgeable and eloquent fellow. Speaking of, that reminds me of a time I was in Paris with Lestat the Lion Court of Anne Rice fame. He's real, by the way. And we just... What was that? What's making that horrible sound?
Looks like Mr. Watership got out of his cage.
Why have you given that beast a name?
I name all of my pets.
You idiot! Haven't you seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail? This is an apex predator!
You're joking.
I would never joke about something like this. Let me think. Okay, here's what we'll do. I'm gonna go to that window, materialize, defenestrate myself. Hopefully the noise will distract it long enough for you to escape. Do you understand?
Yes.
Okay then. I hope you live long enough for us to reshoot the ending. I didn't even finish my story. Ready? On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Ah!
Come here, Mr. Watership.
Bye-bye.